And just like that, we can start. So, Jason, welcome. If you can present yourself a little bit and your company and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Jason Cohen. My fourth startup is called WP Engine. I started it about 10 years ago. We are uh, the premier digital experience platform for WordPress, which means if you run WordPress sites and you want it to be enterprise grade, be fast, secure, stay up, etc., then we're the premier brand for that. 10 years later, we have about 900 employees, 130,000 customers, um, well over 100 million a year, as you mentioned and before, in revenue. And yeah, so we've seen a lot of scale. Obviously, I think that's the subject today, and it's definitely has been an interesting ride so far, and we're still growing quickly, and so there still are challenges, and I think maybe they'd never end.
That's true. I also, I also keep on talking with other founders friends, and it's funny because we meet every week, and we never run out of problems. But we do solve a lot, so hopefully we are doing some stuff. One thing I'd like to give some context is you're currently the founder and CTO. That's correct.
Right.
Why CTO and not CEO in your view?
Well, I was the CEO for the first 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then at around 70, 80 people or so, a few things became apparent. What does the company need from a CEO at that scale and beyond? As we go into, say, hundreds of people, what do you need? What are those bullet points? There are things like hiring and then holding to account a real executive team, like not just entrepreneurs figuring things out as they go, but
That's right.
people who've seen the movie a couple of times and can bring that experience in, so that at least there's some mistakes you don't make, some corners you can see around. Um, Board management and other things. There's lots of things that happen that are different, say going into 100 people and above, different offices, you can just go on and on. So there's things that you need from the CEO at that point that are different from when there's 2 people or even 20 people. Um, and so the question is, was I the right person for that? Am I good at those things? And do I like it? And to the extent that I'm not good at it, is it exciting to become good at it? And the answer to most of those was no. In other words, most of the things that I was not good at also were things I would not be excited to try to be, which also not only means when you do that anyway, you resent work. That's what
That's
happens.
right.
And probably you don't become excellent at those things anyway. So that's a bad path. It's a path that a lot of founders take, however, because of the ego of being the CEO or something like that. So you don't want to stay in the area that you love and are great at and that the company needs, which is the trifecta that it should be. And so they get into a position that they don't like, which is ironic. Here you are, a founder making a company. So ideally, this should be whatever you want, quote unquote, because you don't have a boss, and yet you build a job you don't want,
That's
that you
right.
resent, that you dislike, and that's where a lot of burnout comes from as well. So it's ironic and bad, and happens a lot. It's very common, actually, because it's hard to think about these things, hard to plan these things, and also because sometimes the options aren't clear. Like, what are my options for trying to stay in that area of what I love, what I'm good at, what the company needs, that still satisfy other things that I want for my career or my position or whatever. That can be, it can be unclear what options I even have. Or you take something like ego that trumps everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, then okay, well, you have that, you got to keep that, but then you're in a position you don't like. So it was that kind of thinking that resulted in our current CEO, Heather Brunner, taking the reins for the past 6 years, and it's been fantastic. Now, of course, there's a lot of founder stories where it's not fantastic. That's another worry. What if this doesn't go well? That's a very legitimate worry. But when it does go well, it's a beautiful thing, and it's just been fantastic these past 6 years. So even longer than when I was a CEO, right? It's even longer than that has transpired after that, and it's been wonderful. A lot of our success is directly due to her, and would not have happened if I were in that seat. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place. And how do you develop this sort of self-awareness? You mentioned a lot of, founder coming at this level actually hang out to it, probably because of the ego, as you mentioned. So how do you actually develop this self-awareness? Or is it maybe lack of knowledge, or that it's a possibility, or what would you say?
A couple of things. One is having good advisors, because the best advisor will hold up a mirror so you can see what you really are, which is
Nice.
really scary. It's you don't really want to see that. Um, it's bad enough hearing your own voice recording. No one likes
Yes,
that, right?
that's
Well, this is
right.
much worse. It's holding up it's hearing your personality or your real self. That's even worse than your voice. Um, and so that's helpful. Another thing is prior experience. And so uh, my
Hmm.
previous company was called Smart Bear, and that's where my online moniker comes from. Online, I'm a Smart Bear. That comes from that company's name. And there, I did hold on, and I got into a position that I burned out in. I ended up selling Smart Bear, and it was a good deal. And so, fortunately, that all worked out okay. But in retrospect, um, although that worked out well, it wasn't due to a plan or having good options on the table or being really self-aware of what's going on. It was a little bit more fortunate because I had really dug myself into a bad place and didn't even really realize it consciously.
Hmm.
So, having gone through that out the other side and then seeing that, so now it's in my head more consciously, like, oh, that's not a good place to be in. So then, again, years on when I started WP Engine, and then years on uh, when when we made the switcheroo, I had that experience in my head as well as people holding up the mirror. But even then, um, ego was a hard thing to let go of. Like, I'm not trying to make this out of something that was an easy decision. It probably took me 3 months of really turning it over and trying to figure it out. Like, I'm not trying to say it was a snap decision, but uh, without going to the whole story, the fact is that as the founder, you always get to keep the ego part forever. You get to keep ego.
Sure.
You'll always be the founder of the company, whether you're
That's
there or
right.
not, whatever title you have, however many reports you have, whatever size the budget you have, including zero. Like, you're still the founder. So whatever happens that's bad, you could say, well, that wasn't me. And if it's good, you can say, well,
If it's
I
good, you
started
take the
that thing.
credits.
Yeah. So, like,
I
in
love it.
a certain funny high level way, you're always going to get the credit. You always get to keep the ego. In fact, so so that's a useful thing to keep in mind, so that you say, all right, so I get to keep that. Now go back to what I said. What does the company need from whatever this position is? Am I the right person for that in terms of my skills and my passion or energy for doing those things? Go back to that, because you get to keep the ego part regardless.
That's nice. Okay, so let's say I figured out that okay, my operational bandwidth are from 0 to 70 employees, like you mentioned, and then now I need to find someone. Do you rely on your advisors, or how do you actually go and source someone that's going to replace you and has that operational bandwidth that is going to work at for
Yeah.
your company?
So it's really difficult. I mean, if you're the CEO is especially difficult to replace. I think any other leader is difficult, but also if you made a mistake, it's a little easier to remedy
Hmm.
that. But with the CEO, it's just such a powerful and visible and influential position that a mistake that even takes a short amount of time is difficult. Also, what's the morale of, oh, well, you said this person was it, they're not, so why am I going to believe you the next time? And how come it's not you? And like, it just starts becoming, it can become a problem in general. Whereas you may not say the same thing about a VP of sales or a CTO. You might
Hmm.
say, yeah, that didn't work out. Okay. It doesn't feel quite as damaging or unrecoverable as the CEO feels. Of course, it's not unrecoverable, but it might feel that way more so. Um, and a lot of people have stories of, oh, yeah, the new CEO came in and then everything was bad. You have fewer stories of the new VP of sales came in. Yeah, everything okay. Sales were a problem or whatever, but we replaced them. You don't feel like the whole company died because of that, but you do have those feelings, at least, if not stories of CEO. So it is trickier. So one thing, of course, is people you've worked with before, but that's rare because probably you haven't worked with someone who's this good yet. If you did, maybe you would have started the company with them in the first place, right? Like, you
Yeah.
probably
Oh, it would
not.
have been your mentor. Yes.
Maybe, yeah. Also, this person probably is not an entrepreneur. Like, this is probably not someone who started a company, just because most people haven't, and that doesn't matter, right? Like, that's because that's not what's happening anymore. So it's not a qualification. Um, so that can be hard because you say, well, this how do you get comfortable with a leader who doesn't have that shared experience like you have? And of course, the answer is because of what's going to happen next, which is the current job, right? But still, it can be hard to find
Yeah.
that person because they're not going to be just like you, and there's certain things you're not going to share. It's difficult then to suss that out. One of the things we did is Heather first started as the COO, so
Ah,
operations
nice.
officer.
Hmm.
Then she was able to pick up one department at a time and start managing it, start making changes. That did a couple of things. First, it helped her get more of a sense of the actual workings of the business. It helped her develop relationships with all the leaders and other people in the business. Um, and it also gave other people a chance to work with her and see, oh, wow, she's amazing. And this is great. This is so much better already. And she just got here and all this kind of stuff. So that by the time we're ready for the full transition, half the company's already working for her and likes it. And therefore feels like, yeah, more of this makes a lot of sense. And yeah, Jason, the engineered person, bringing over engineering and
Yeah.
product makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense too. And like, actually all this makes a lot of sense. And so that was really nice to have that kind of a transition rather than an immediate thing. Another thing that was really helpful, which I think is repeatable, is also around that time, it was clear that we had a strong and company culture that attracted people to work there and was a reason for people to stay. But we hadn't codified it, meaning we hadn't written down this is exactly what it is in words, maybe on the wall, but of course
Hmm.
everything's on the wall. So, but in words that we actually use every day so that we're actually making decisions on that basis, especially the difficult decisions that you make on the basis, which is the only way you actually have values. When you make hard decisions or when no one's looking, right? That's when you
That's
know what
right.
you have. But if you haven't written it down, it's hard to know what that is. It's hard to have words in your head that you use to make those decisions if it's not written down. So Heather led about 20 of us or so in the development of those values. Now, of course, that meant getting them from people, right? Like um, um, pulling that out of folks and really discussing exactly what the word should be. Because of course, that discussion is half the battle. That discussion is how you're really figuring out. We kind of have a sense of this, but if we're going to put it in words, it's going to be hard to hash out exactly what we mean. Not too much that limits what we might do in the future or what might be acceptable, but
Hmm.
not so vague or little that we're really not saying anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that it's difficult to get in that middle ground, and that's fine. But by leading everyone in that, not only did we exit that process, and it took maybe a month of meeting, for 3 hours twice a week or something like that. Not only did we exit with something that we could use that we still have to this day on the wall, um, to say this is who we are, this is our culture, this is what we value, this is how we'll make difficult decisions, hiring, firing, etc. Not only do we have that, but because Heather led that, again, that leadership and how she was there and everyone felt like, oh, this is a leader who gets us because this was part of defining who we even are. In fact, she is one of us. She didn't just get us from the outside.
Love
She
it.
is us. Like she
Mm.
was part of that. So we emerged not only with that in codified, but with Heather as the actual leader of having codified that, and thus really holding the torch of culture. Which again, sometimes you can worry. Well, the founders got that torch. Will the new CEO have that same torch or not? Because the CEO will dictate the tone. So that made it extremely clear. The answer is yes. This is all shared for real. So I really do feel like that's a repeatable process. That idea of this new leader either creating or refreshing the codification of the culture. That's a really interesting way to bind a team together.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think um, the leader that comes in is the one that helps architecturing the culture going forward?
Yes, I mean but I wouldn't. So people say things like the CEO dictates the culture, or perhaps the founder. I actually don't agree with that.
Hmm.
I think what leaders can do is break the culture by acting against it and therefore showing that it's not real. Like if you demonstrate I can do the opposite of this and it's okay, then what you've demonstrated is that it's not really true.
Yeah, you end up with end run,
Yeah,
putting
but
the
you
value on
can't
the wall,
force
but
it.
not leaving them.
Yeah, but you can't force it. You can't say
Mhm.
like, "Hey, everybody, our culture is one of empathy, so have empathy." Right? That's not how that works, right?
And
Um,
you say that without any empathy, of course, for the person you're talking to.
yeah. So there are some things that are strictly behavioral that you
Hmm.
can just do, I suppose. But like ultimately, you can't tell someone how to be. You can't tell someone really what to value. And so what you have to do is hire people that in fact adhere, are already people for whom these
Yeah.
resonate. That's not a rubric. Oh, you're 4 out of 5. Not like that. But in general,
Hmm.
that this resonates with that human is what's needed. Or vice versa, if someone's the best engineer ever and super productive, but also they're terrible on the team, they violate something or other, whatever that is, and of course you work with them first. But if that can't be done, if it can't be fixed, then you have to make that decision, right? So again, like if a leader doesn't make the decision to exit someone where after working with them they can't cut it on a culture basis, no matter what they're like. If the leader doesn't do that, then that means they're tolerating violating culture, and then you don't have it anymore. So they can break it, but they can't create it directly. It's everybody that decides what it's like to work at WP Engine. Every single person decides what it's like
Hmm.
because they come in and they are whatever they're like, and whatever they're like is what it's like for the people quite literally sitting to their left and right, or other peers, or in
Yeah.
meetings, or the customers they're talking to, or whatever. They are what it is like.
Sure, but at some
Heather and
point
I
there
are
is
not
a
what it's like. The employees are what it's like. So
but there is
that's
a hiring process. So the hiring process hopefully vet or
right.
check for a certain fit for the culture
Right.
or
Right. So you
some
try to encode
alignment.
it in these things, in
Hmm.
like hiring and performance management and many other things. What do you celebrate as a company? What do you celebrate every day? What do you celebrate in a very big way, but just once a quarter? It's all these kinds of, there's a lot of actions that go into it. We could spend an hour just talking about how do you do culture at scale, because it's hard and most companies don't, right? They may have a, well, whether it's good or bad or whatever, they have a strong culture of some kind, and then as they
Hmm.
grow, it sort of turns into this corporate gray
Yep.
and not much of a thing, and everyone knows the stuff on the wall is not really true, and that's what it tends
Hmm.
to do. I think one of the reasons is this notion of like, oh, it'll just come from the top and that's enough, and it's not true. Um, just like there's that old saying of A players hire A players, but B players hire C players, and then you have
Yes.
low performance. Well, the same thing is true in culture, and especially when you use words like culture fit. That's not good enough. That's like a B player, just fits, doesn't violate, right? But then B hires C, right? An A is a beacon of culture, a repeater, a font, a source of culture.
Love
And
it.
again, like not everyone is going to be like that about all things, and certainly not every day, right? Like so, I mean, this is not like everyone's walking around with a big grin all the time. That's not what I'm talking about. But again, like I think even just subjectively, the difference in that person where you're like, yeah, they live that. Maybe not every second, maybe not every day, but they're that. They are that. And if everyone were like that, we really would have that culture. It's that sort of sense, right? And so that's what I would call an A player, that type of thing. And so yeah, even culture fit is not correct, not a correct way to think about it at scale, because again, it needs to be generated all over the place. That's part of how it actually not only doesn't weaken, but gets stronger. Like our culture is stronger now than it was when we were only 500 people or only 100 people, because with all those repeaters, it's awfully hard. How do you become the 901st person who doesn't fit? And there's 900 people that do. Wow, like
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
you're gonna stand out and not even feel right in there, right? So again, like it can be stronger over time if you're enforcing it.
I love that. It's the bit of the organism, pushing out people who don't fit at all. So yeah, can give us some examples of cultural thing that scale, or how do you actually make that happen beside the repeater?
So one thing we do is every quarter we have something called the Culture Awards. And what happens
Oh.
is anyone can nominate anyone else, and they pick one of our 5 culture pillars. Although sometimes they're like, I can't just pick one. There's 3. It's fine. This is not a super formal thing, right? So anyway, they nominate them for one of the pillars, and they write in long form, this person should win this because they do this, and I had these problems. They stayed late and really helped me, and they didn't have to do that. And even when they moved on to another team, they made sure I was okay, and blah blah blah. But I don't know, whatever. Like all this, just all this stuff comes out, and so people just nominate each other completely um, for any reason in any way that they want, and we collect those and review them as an executive team to find people who get nominated reliably. And what did it was someone just like, yeah, they're really good, or was it this really amazing writing where they really touched another person, that kind of thing. And so anyway, we pick people, and we try to also look at things like, are we representing all of our departments? Are we representing the locations that we are all in? Are we representing different kinds of people, men, women, different backgrounds and other kinds of stuff? Now the goal is not, it's not a quota. We don't always have like half men, half women, but it certainly would make any sense to have 6 men and no women. Like, we're just probably biased in some way that we need to take a look at, because our company is much more even than that. In fact, our executive team is half and half, and even in R&D that I still run, half of our VPs and half of our directors are women. So if our company is in fact diverse, then it wouldn't make sense if the culture award winners weren't. Right? So
That's right.
it's not a quota, but you just look at it and make sure, like, hey, are we sort of highlighting people in all kinds of places and in the company? So, and here's the magical thing. Like, all this is just like, yeah, okay, here's the magical part. So Heather has the winners in the written thing, the written notes stacked, and she starts reading them and essentially redacted anything about the person, their name, their gender, etc., to try to not make it obvious who it is. Right? She starts reading it aloud, and then people just shout out when they think they know who it is.
Ah, nice.
And of course, what's nice is usually there's a whole bunch of names before it gets to the right one, because those are right also. Those people are embodied, right? Like,
That's a great hack, is to figure out, how many people are actually fitting this description. I love it.
so you can imagine the love that's already happening in the room with that,
Yeah.
right? And then, of course, when the right names pull out, oh yeah, it's that, come on up. And Heather continues to read all this. But you can imagine having these incredibly heartfelt things written about you from your peers that are absolutely true.
Mm.
There's absolutely no reason why anyone would lie ever. So these are heartfelt and absolutely honest. And, amazing things about you that you probably don't get this kind of feedback ever, about the impact that you make in another person's life.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you think you're just doing your job or just, just trying to help somebody, that it really can make more of an impact than you even know. And then not only to see those words about you, but they're read in front of 900 people who all now see what you're doing, even when no one's looking, right? And so it's unusual to get out of there without crying. You can't go through that and not tear up. It's too powerful. I always cry during those things for them. It's like, it's strong. Those moments, like, they're just amazing. And so that's what I mean when I said earlier, like, what does it mean to celebrate? Now, you can't do that thing all the time. So we do that once a quarter, right? That's right, like, because it's a big thing. So there's things that you would celebrate every day, like, hey, thanks for doing that kind of stuff, right? And we use 15.5 for a lot of interpersonal stuff. And one of the things you can do in there is give people a high five, and we do it a lot. I think R&D probably does about 1,000 a month that we give one. So, like, there's these little things you can do all the time to reinforce, hey, thanks for that. Hey, that was good, right? So there's little things like that, and then you can do big things sometimes that have an effect. And, like, all these different time frames and magnitudes matter. Like, if you only did it once in a while, that's not good enough, because it is what happens every day that's really what it is, right? And it's nice to celebrate that. Conversely, if you never had a big thing, it's sort of a murmur all the time, but it's nice to have these big stakes in the ground where you really go, wow, this is really important to us. So, I mean, I do think these having all the modalities does matter and does contribute into this, how do you do it? But you can imagine, just like the quarterly thing I mentioned does scale, because there's nominees and that scales, and then reading them out and what that means to people scales. Like, everyone listening to that same thing, it doesn't matter how many people is listening to it, it's equally powerful, right? It does touch everyone the same. So it really scales. So those are examples. But I mean, of course, ultimately it's hiring and then performance management afterwards. That's ultimately, hiring, where, hiring is never perfect on any dimension, but obviously you have to be intentional to at least try to have that be a culture filter. And then, of course, management after the fact. And again, it's not just, oh, here's a violation, you're gone. I mean, I guess you could have that culture. That's okay. Like, you could have a culture that worked that way. And maybe that's kind of more of a, I mean, there's some companies that work that way. It's all right. Our way is not that way, because we want people to improve. If you just throw them away, they're not doing that. So it's worth spending the time, because when someone does improve on whatever, professionally or personally, like, what a great thing to do to or for another human being. Help them, genuinely work with them to get better. I mean, that's a fantastic thing. So that's always the right place to begin. Now, obviously, there can always be a point where you're like, all right, we tried, but sometimes it doesn't work out, and that also is life, right? And another interesting word people use, I know I'm just rambling about this, hopefully it's useful. Some people talk about the company as a family. We're a family.
Yeah,
especially when they have the
it's
warm
either
and
the
fuzzy.
family view or the high
Yeah,
performance view.
the team view. Yeah,
Yeah,
family or team.
that's right.
And especially we have this very fuzzy, warm and fuzzy culture. We want to nurture people. We want them to grow. We have this. We care about our customers. So all this stuff is part of our culture. I'll give you another example. Our first value is do the right thing, and we define it as if it's right for the customer and right for the company, and you're proud of your decision, it's the right thing. And then later, if it's a mistake, it's fine. But at the
Hmm.
moment, you thought it was right and you were proud. That word pride is really interesting because I think although it's subjective, obviously, there's
Yeah.
no number, there's no metric, right? No KPI. But we all know when it's like, we really shouldn't do that. Or, you know
Yeah.
what? The customer is upset, but we really did do the right thing. I'm proud of what we did, even though it was hard. Every person
Yeah.
knows. And so tapping into that is, well, subjective. It actually is pretty sharp in real life, that notion.
But that's
This
an
is what I mean.
interesting one. Actually, doesn't
Yeah.
actually lead to paralysis, like people not really willing to take any decisions because of that, like that fear of not filling all those requirements.
No, because
Mm.
like if you feel proud of it,
But
then
we all know people who actually, will never know. They keep on like looping over the same thing, and they actually never actually come to a point of making a decision. Does that actually cause any problem or not
well,
really?
that can be a problem no matter what. I don't care
That's
what your
true.
culture is. That's a problem. Decision making is its own whole subject, which is
Yeah,
interesting, right? Decision making is difficult, and there's different kinds of decisions, and how do you come to that? That's a whole interesting system, and it's not harder but different as you grow. It's always hard to make big decisions.
that's right.
Um, the nature of it, the context of the details certainly change as you grow, what those kind of big decisions are, but they're always hard, no matter how many people are there. But so anyway, we have all this touchy-feely stuff, pride and getting better, right? So you might imagine that we say we're a family, but we don't.
Hmm.
We say we're a team. Because the thing about a family is you don't get to pick who's in the family, but you do get to pick who's on the team. And we have to. We have to pick who's on the team and who's not on the team if we're going to have high performance, even as we are humans and we care about people and we want it, right? So to me, like the best teams are that way. Like even in the sports team analogy, like if you're not performing right now, you can't go out there and play. But that doesn't mean you're instantly off the team. It means, what do you need? Maybe you need to recover. Maybe you need special training. Maybe you just are having a bad time. Maybe, like there's a lot of things it could be besides just getting kicked off the team. That's not, just
Yeah,
because you're high performance doesn't mean you're instantly off the team. It just means you're not playing right now. Now, if you can't get better and you can't perform, and you will never be able to get out there again on this team, not because you're a bad person, but on
sure.
this team you don't fit, right? Then you can't be on the team because we need team members who are going to be out there playing the game. So then you get to that. But there's a way to say we're a team, and yes, performance matters, and yes, we pick who's on the team, but also we're humans and we care and all this stuff. That is possible. So that's what we are like, and we don't say family, and that's why. We can care for each other that way, like family, but we don't use that analogy for that reason. So anyway, I only said that just because it's a common thing for people to discuss, and especially
Yeah,
in smaller companies or bootstrap companies, we often use those words of family because it does feel more like, well, I guess personal, and it is personal. And that phrase, it's not personal, it's business, is crap. Of course, it's
of
personal.
course it's personal.
It's people. Like it's definitely personal, right? Like so it is personal, and
Yeah.
um, so I think that's where you get to that tendency of say family. There are companies that really do act as a family, where you kind of can't get fired, and
Yeah,
they will
and
work with you forever, and that's
yeah,
fine. Again, like I'm not in any way putting that
different
down. It's
types.
just different cultures, and I'm just pointing out, like, it's an interesting thing for any founder or leader to think about. What are we? Are we a hard team? We are off the team if you don't perform. Are we a kind of human team, like I just described? Are we a family for real? And no, yes, we will work with you for years, because that's a beautiful thing to do too, by the way. But what are we? We need to decide what we are. That's important.
Those are great example of how you scale and maintain a culture at scale. Thanks for that. Um, Coming back to the relationship with the CEO, coming for pushing the company higher or scaling the company, were there something in retrospect that you felt like, yes, I couldn't really have done that specifically, or things that you grew by learning or learned actually by just watching and then figuring out?
Oh, a ton.
Yeah, I'm
What subject would
expecting
you
to
like to
get some
start with?
answers. Well,
Well,
let's
it
say
can
the
be
first thing that
complicated as
really
well.
surprised you in a very nice way, and you say like,
Sure.
"Oh gosh, that's a great personal development. I'm happy," or an insight, I
Yeah,
had.
here's a great one. I use this all the time, this phrase all the time,
Nice.
and it relates to what we were just talking about with culture and
Okay.
how when someone doesn't fit, whether it's performance or culture, it is time to go. How do you do that in a firm but human
Human way.
or humane way? So this is a phrase from Heather, our CEO. So this is something I learned from her, right?
There you go.
Which is this: General Patton on the decision, Mother Teresa on the exit.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
General Patton, it's a American general. It doesn't matter. The point
Yeah,
is
yeah.
be 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 uh, be decisive. Once it's decided, do it. Don't wait. Well, and like for example, a common thing that happens in management is, someone hasn't been doing well for a really long time, been working with them, whatever, and it's really time, and so you have some sort of meeting which is not quite decisive. Like instead of just saying it's not working out, you need to find another position somewhere else where you can be successful
Yep.
in so many words. Instead, you're like, well, it's not really working out. It's really bad. So like if this goes on for any longer, like you don't really decide right then. So what do? They get a little better right away because now they're really paying attention. And then it fades back away pretty soon, like in 3 weeks. And here you're right back to where you were.
That's right.
And all you've done is dragged it out. That's an example of not being General Patton. So it's not working out. We've tried, but now you have to make a decision. Like the words even in that meeting are, I have decided that, right? This has to be done already, not a discussion. But Mother Teresa on the exit. But what do we want to do for this person? What does it mean for them to leave? Is there some kind of exit package we would like to give them? Because the idea usually isn't, oh, we want to throw this person out.
Mm,
And in America anyway, it's you have 2 weeks of pay and then it's all over. That's the typical, or that's, I should say, that's the legal requirement. Thus, it is
mhm.
the typical thing. You don't have to do that. You can give them more. You can say, look, we want them to find another position. We want to give them some time where they still have income to do that, and so we're going to give them whatever. You can think about medical. In other words,
Yeah.
again, in America, we have such a ridiculous medical uh, system, but the short version is sometimes depending on what date you set for what things, can be really impactful in what they can get from a medical perspective.
Oh
You
wow.
can do that.
Mhm.
Like, so
Mhm.
there's all sorts of things you can do. Of course, you could talk about how do you talk about them leaving the company? What is the story? What is the messaging? Who's doing that messaging, etc. That's a way to be compassionate about how people are leaving, right? So there's all kinds of things. If you have some kind of horrible incident that happens, that's different. That's a whole different thing, right? But assuming we're in this place where it's not like that, which typically isn't, right? It's just that they need to go, but it's not like that. Um, Mother Teresa on the exit is the way that you can be humane and lay your head on the pillow as the manager and say, I really, whether however they received it and et cetera, like I know I really have done right by this person. I worked with them as long as I could, and then when it finally wasn't possible, I didn't drag it out, and I was humane about it. Another thing about dragging it out is it's worse for them, and it's worse for the team, and it's
Yeah.
worse for the manager. Like it serves nobody to drag it out when you need to be General Patton, make a decision, and it hurts the team because they have to work with that person, whatever that means, right? And it even hurts the manager because they have to. It's constantly taking up energy and talking about it, thinking about it, having meetings about stuff. Like it's just a drag. So it needs this, and it's bad for that person too. Almost always, they know they're not being successful, but they probably don't. They probably don't want to leave for various reasons, right?
Sure.
And that's understandable too. Like all this is understandable. No one's, in no case is anyone here acting in an evil way, or
Malicious. Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
not what's happening. It's uncomfortable. You don't want to face it. You care about the other person. You don't want to have to do that. Like it's all coming from a place of being a good human. But hence this way of doing what's right for the company and that person and their team, and also being Mother Teresa, doing what's right from a human level. That's a great thing. So I learned that from Heather, and we always do that here. So
Can you think of another one that isn't directly related to how to manage team, but like more on a personal level, like things like, I should really be able to do that stuff, in that role.
oh, like for myself of
Yeah.
developing in my role.
Personal development. Yes.
Well, almost everything is people and management.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not learning how to write code from Heather. I'm really good at that already. Right. What I learned is like
It's true,
today I
actually.
manage a
Yeah.
department of 150 people, and
Right.
it's all about people management. Now, I guess it might be things like strategy or other things of that nature,
Yeah.
but that is most of what I've learned. These kinds of things.
So,
Um,
okay, so let me rephrase the question a little bit. Does that mean that you attribute the growth and the scale of WP Engine, maybe let's say mostly, maybe 80%, 90%, to how you guys are managing people and the culture at the moment?
well, ultimately, high performance company probably comes from a high performance team.
Mm.
So in that sense, yes. That's not entirely true. The market is really good. That helps. You know, the product is really good. That helps.
Helps. Yeah.
But we all know companies that have great products and are not successful. We all know companies who are in a great market and are not successful. So of course those help, but they're also not sufficient, as we know.
All right.
Um,
So tell us about then the recruiting process in order to to make sure that you get, those A players. So if I want to replicate, the success of WP Engine through people.
so first of all, again, you have to codify what it is you're looking for, because otherwise, how
Yeah.
do you seek it? Okay, so let's say you've
Point
done that.
taken. Yes.
Now, what you can't do is ask, so for example, what if it's empathy? You can't ask, do you have empathy? You're right. That's not how you find out. So then for each of these things that you want to test is kind of a weird word, maybe not quite test, but suss out.
Assess.
You would assess, yeah. You'd ask like, okay, so what are some things I could ask where it will come out in the answer, in the way that they think, the way that they answer, the way they describe things, the way they describe themselves, et cetera, where some of these things will come out, and I'll be watching for that. I don't really care that much about their full answer. I'm really watching for these other things. So for empathy, there's a classic example from Southwest Airlines, in which they put the people in a circle all facing each other in chairs, and they go around the circle telling um, like embarrassing or sort of crazy stories.
Right.
And what the interviewers are watching is not the storyteller, they're watching the other people in the circle.
Oh,
Because
nice.
a person that has empathy, when they hear something horrible happen to somebody else, goes like this.
Ah.
It's written on their body, it's written on their face, the empathy. And the people are just going like this. Don't, right? So if what you want to test for is empathy, you're
Yeah.
looking at it, right? So that's a classic. So we don't do that, but but it's a good one. Well, but I'll give you an example of what we do. One thing I like to ask is, so it's nice to ask about events that were high emotional stakes.
Mm.
So for example, I'll ask like, all right, so what's like the last time that you or the team you were on really failed? Like it was a disaster. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Just walk me through some of that. Tell me about that. So let's take a dimension like accountability. So a person with high accountability sounds like this. Yeah, man, we thought we were doing the right thing, but it wasn't. And this finally it finally turned out like this, and then we probably should have noticed this, but we didn't. And then I had some ideas, and yeah, maybe those were right, but we made the decision, and I made it too, and like whatever, it just wasn't right. And what did I learn? And maybe they learned something from it. Maybe they didn't. They're maybe like, I'm not sure. Like maybe to pay attention. Like I don't even know if what I learned, but yeah, that definitely happened, right? That's a high accountability, right? And then low accountability is like, yeah, I told them it wasn't going to work, and they did it anyway. Guess what? Didn't work. I was like, yeah, well, so that's why I left that company. They're dumb,
Uh,
right?
yeah, we all know
And
those. Yeah.
that second person might be right, but even so, there's a way to communicate exactly that. So, for example, I would say something, and this happens at WP Engine. I would say something like, yeah, I did have a different idea, but I disagreed and committed. And I
Mm-hmm.
was committed to that. And I was behind that. We failed, and I was working as hard as I could for that to succeed. I wasn't, I'm not holding that other thing. No, we didn't succeed. And so here's what we might have learned, et cetera, et cetera. Still us, right? So, so that's an example of something I do ask, and that you can look for things like accountability and other things in a high stakes question like that.
So you got empathy, accountability. What are some of the other things that you're testing? And I guess also you have to make sure that the one you're picking up are the one who will thrive in the market as well, because obviously to an extent, if I choose like laziness or lack of commitment and things like that, even though it may be part of the culture I define, that may actually not resonate in the market. So do you attribute that some of the attributes of the culture that you picked up are actually the right one for growing at that level?
Yes, and you do make a good point that here's how I would make the point you just made in terms of the words that you
Mm-hmm.
pick. If you pick a word and it's impossible to imagine a high performance organization without that, then that's not really part of your culture. You're not
That's right.
really saying anything. I mean, it may be part of your hiring or something. That's fine. That's fine. But you're not really defining something special. That's who you really are. So to your point, like laziness, no one would ever put laziness on there. So being studious or something, whatever the opposite of laziness is, industrious. Um, is that really part of your culture or not? It may be if it's really extreme. We all work really hard. We work late. We all work 10-hour days. We don't go home. And now you're talking about the gaming industry, and that is true. That
That's
does
true.
exist.
I've
So
been there 10
yeah,
years.
yeah. So
Yes,
so
crunch
so, and
times.
if it's an extreme, then yes. Like even though you still, of course, you want everyone to work hard. It's like yeah, but we're not talking about working hard. We're talking about like we devote our lives here. Okay, that is a culture. Now you're talking. So if it's soft, like we work hard, that's to me, that's crap. That's not a culture. That's not a statement. That's lazy words because it's not really saying anything. If you want to say we devote ourselves and the company comes first and everybody else comes second, now you're saying something, and that's cool. Now, if you're a person who doesn't like that culture, then it's not cool and you shouldn't go work there. But there are people who thrive on that idea of like, I'm totally in this, and so is everyone else. I'm working as hard as I can, and so is everything else. So is everyone else around me. That creates this environment that can be really awesome, and maybe you can create and accomplish things that you could
Mhm.
not do otherwise.
I, I
So that can,
I never actually find again the same culture as when I was working in video games, for sure.
yeah. So maybe I mean, that can be a good thing. Again, culture is often not about good or bad. It's about finding a fit for you, right? That's the key, right? So when you look at some of the things we talk about, there absolutely is that. A lot of companies don't have empathy. A lot of support teams, empathy is not one of the things.
Hmm.
That it's like, no, you're a shield against the customers. How many tickets can you turn in a day? There are companies that I won't name that we sometimes get people from support from, where it literally is like if you haven't finished 100 tickets today, you'll just simply stay late until you've done so, because the
Mm.
first thing is tickets. Again, like that's an efficiency culture. You can do that. Like
Mhm.
it is efficient. That is true. It is efficient. Um, so anyway, there are different things you do. You can certainly have a culture where people are not accountable. In fact, many companies that is the case. People are not really held accountable to stuff. There's a lot of
Mm-mm.
excuses, and basically, that's how it goes. That is something that happens, whether it's intentional or not. It happens. It's hard to hold people accountable. I have trouble with that too. Um, it's hard, but you can still state it as a as an important thing, that so that you don't forget that you have to work on that. So I do think that question is good. Is the opposite of this word, could that ever be? And if the answer is no, then that's not really saying much. But if the answer is yes, in fact, I can name some companies where that's the case. So you're like, okay, good. Then that means you are writing down something that's meaningful and just makes
Interesting.
you distinct from some other from other set of companies that way. Good, good. Now you're on your way to writing down a culture that is real.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, coming back to the value, then we were talking accountability and empathy. Do you have more?
Oh yeah, we have we have a bunch. We uh, we value honesty and introspection, which may be obvious from this conversation,
Mhm.
um,
I would
and
say so.
so that all wraps up into making mistakes. We're accountable to things that went the way we didn't want, but if we're honest about that and you know we we were comfortable with the decisions we made at the time, then that's how you have a really healthy way to say, okay, yeah. So like no one's pointing the finger. We're just okay, good. Now we know what's still going on. Now we know what's going on, and we can move forward, whatever that means. So we can deal with it and not get trapped in blaming and all this other stuff. We can just move forward because we can just be honest and go. So honesty and introspection are some of them. We have one whole section called the best get better. So high performance and
Okay.
how do we improve after that. One is built to last, which is that we're building for the long term. So long-term success of the company, not short-term profit or short-term, I don't know. Oh, we could charge this customer even though this happened. And yeah, you get some more dollars this month, but if that means they leave in 6 months because you're not being a good partner with them, then that's wrong. If the goal is the long term,
That's
the
right.
way we say that is built to
You
last.
guys raised the price on me because I didn't tell you, but I'm also a customer. You guys raised the price on me, and I'm still there. So you did
Yeah.
something good and great support, by the way. So I'm fully behind.
Thanks. Another one is committed to give back.
Mm.
We're built on open source. We're built on a community that where many people work very hard to create software and add-ons and help and educational materials um, and events. I mean, you just name it, like tons of stuff, so that this ecosystem exists. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't exist. Therefore, it's one of our primary pieces of our DNA is, oh, well, we have to give back to that ecosystem. We can't just be takers. We have to give back as much as we can. So early on, we couldn't that much. Of course, now we can a lot, and we do. We give millions of dollars a year directly to things like events so that people can learn WordPress or other things in the foundation, that the nonprofit organization that
Hmm.
runs a lot of the WordPress stuff. We directly contribute code back to Core with multiple people. In fact, we own some of the components in Core. Of course, all our competitors get that. Right. That's fine. We got other stuff. They get this. That's right. That's how this particular community works. So we're going to participate exactly in that way. We create new open source things that we just give away.
But
We
like you mentioned, if I follow your track of your thinking, then your competitors, what makes you successful is the people and not the actual product that you're using. So there
yeah.
is no problem in actually giving back and having your competitor using it. That's Did
No.
I get that right?
Although some of our competitors don't give back at all and make a point out of not
Mm.
participating in the ecosystem. And again, you can each person should decide for themselves what they think about that and what that means about that culture. And again, like people work there, so obviously there are people where that makes sense, and then there's other people they say no, and they have our view of like, no, participating here means you give back at least when you can. Again, like in the first year, there's not much we could do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if you're in your 10th year, of course there's things you can do. Now, what's the magnitude of that? I don't know. It's what you can afford to do, right? Like it's not about that kind of measurement, but maybe it's more about attitude and doing your best.
Yep.
So we have that as the fifth of our 5 values. So talk about front and center and who we are. And it's not just WordPress. There's other open source things, and also locally. So we are in 7 different locations around the world, and we do lots of give back stuff with local organizations of all kinds. Like in Austin, we do things with the food bank and various cancer organizations and homeless organizations and so forth. Various things, some of which come out of individual people and things they're passionate on, and we're like, that sounds good, and we sort of work through them to do that. And some of it is a little more organized, and we do a whole bunch of stuff. We have budgets for that, and people spend their time. So it is WordPress, but it's also all the communities that we're in, like the local community that we're in. Where we live is just as much, of course, a part of our ecosystem community as WordPress. And so WordPress is obvious, and of course we're going to always do more and more there, but also where we all live around the world.
Got it. Jason, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you only got like just a few minutes more. I see a few books behind you. Are they like your favorite book, or did you just like happen to go into this room?
This is a mixture of books. Some of them some of them get sent to me.
Oh, okay.
Some of them I'm in, like they quoted something and they sent me a book.
Oh, nice.
Some of them I have read all the way through.
Okay.
So,
So let's focus on the one you would recommend,
okay.
for people
Uh,
listening at that level.
okay. I'm looking at the very top one here. Just a random one. That's Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
which I think is a very
Classic.
good one about management and how people work together. Um, the next one is called Leadership and Self-Deception from the Arbinger Institute. Arbinger it's kind of a system of thinking about how to work together professionally. And we really like this. We send all our managers to this training, and that's one of the books that sort of goes along with that.
Nice.
I'll give you an example concept that they have is um, they have something called outward mindset. And the idea is this: there's 2 people that need to work together. usually both are thinking, man, I have my own priorities. I have my own goals. I have my own things I got to do. And I don't have enough people to do it because who does? It was plenty of people, so they're not time constrained, right? And now this other person wants something from me, or we have to work together on something, and man, I'm already strapped for stuff. So the typical way is just like you kind of protect your own, you come first, and they call that sort of an inward mindset, looking inward. The outward mindset is the opposite, but the nice way to think of it is this: you go to the other person, you say, "Hey, here are my goals. Here is what I need to do. Um, of course, I don't want to miss those, but I want to help you. What are your goals, and let's work together to figure out how to make our set of goals together work. So there's not so much of a zero-sum game of I'm protecting my, let's talk about what ours are. Then I'll try to think about how could I help you, and you try to think about how you can help me, or how we can do what you need without too much disruption to mine. Let's do that together."
Hmm. Hmm.
Yet another way might be to say, it's another typical one I use all the time is with product and engineering, because often they have to work together, but often it's like this.
Yep.
And so to me, it's often like, hey, engineering, your job is to figure out how to do it and do it. But what I want to know is how can you help product? What are product's goals and how can you actually help those? And they're like, oh yeah. And hey, product, same thing. How can you help the engineers with easier stuff to work on, or et cetera? In other words, both of you can point the blame finger at the other, and you're both probably right. But the better question is, how can you help the other person be better, rather than how can you point a finger? When you have that attitude, like maybe things go more right. That's one example of the kinds of things that Arbinger has training on in how to work together better. But again, there's this factor of trading goals. If you don't do that, it's hard to know how to do that. But if once product knows, oh, engineer's trying to make this deadline, and oh, okay, fair enough.
Hmm.
How can I get what I in product want, but work around that? Because understood, I don't want to violate that for you. And similarly, like engineers, like we want to do all this maintenance. The product says, but we have this event coming up, and we got to try to sell stuff. You're like, okay, how can we deliver something great for the event, which might be a little different than what we were doing before, but something great for the event, because I hear you, but still have the time we need to go work on our stuff. Now we're talking. When you're trying to think about the other person's goals, and the other person's trying not to violate yours, that's what they call an outward mindset, and that's a better way to interact. So I just picked randomly the top two things, and there you go.
Love it. So what book are you currently reading?
I'm currently reading Jerry Colonna's new book. I'm trying to think of what it's called. I just picked it up, and I'm blanking on the name, but it's his new book. He's one of the most famous sort of founder and CEO. You could say coaches, but I would say therapist.
I
Is
see.
well known for doing this.
Like that.
And he has a book of kind of personal revelations, and asking very hard questions of yourself. Um, yeah, it's called Reboot.
Okay.
Um,
Seems interesting.
and it, it's so far it's really good. I'm only like 3 chapters in, but so far it's very good. So I guess I would recommend it, even though I'm not that far in. But it it,
All right.
it
The
definitely
first three
causes you
chapter
to ask.
approved by Jason. There you
Yeah,
go.
it causes you to ask very difficult introspective questions, and so that in itself is almost always wise. No
That's
matter
right.
what happens as a result, probably that's healthy.
Love it. Jason, if people want to know more about you or your company, what should they do?
Sure. So the company is wpengine.com, and I'm a smart bear, like the animal.com,
There you go. Well,
or on
Jason,
Twitter.
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.